On August 1, 1976, Niki Lauda stood before 24 other Formula One drivers and begged them not to race at the German Grand Prix. The Nürburgring circuit, he warned, was a death trap, too long, too dangerous, with almost no safety equipment. He pleaded for a boycott, but the vote went 24-1 against him. They laughed, called him afraid, and dismissed his concerns. Just hours later, Lauda's Ferrari crashed and burst into flames. Trapped for 55 seconds, his helmet came loose, and his face was exposed to the fire. Four fellow drivers risked their lives to pull him from the wreckage, and what happened afterward would shock the world even more than the crash itself. Andreas Nicolaus Niki Lauda was born on February 22, 1949 in Vienna, into a wealthy family that owned a paper business. His parents expected him to join it, but Lauda was drawn to speed. At 18, with help from his grandmother, he secretly took out a loan to buy a red Mini Cooper and began racing under a fake name so his father wouldn't find out. In December 1967, he crashed into a guardrail, and the insurance report exposed his secret. Furious, his grandfather warned that if he continued racing, he would be cut off from the family fortune. But Lauda didn't stop. He said later that no balance sheet could ever replace the thrill of the stopwatch. By the time he finished school, he had entered 18 races, won 2, broken his nose, and divided his family. At 19, he walked into a bank and used his life insurance policy to take out a massive loan worth the equivalent of over $500,000 today. With it, he bought a Formula V car and began racing full-time, even forging his father's signature on the contract. When his name appeared in newspapers after finishing third at Osborne in April 1969, his family finally cut him off completely. Lauda moved into a tiny basement apartment, lived on canned food, and sold race photos on Vienna's streets to survive. The bank labeled his file recoverable only if alive. He found that amusing, saying it made him drive more carefully, at least until the debt was paid. Lauda's first professional race came in 1968 at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, the same circuit that would later nearly kill him. He crashed, flipped, and broke his nose but refused to go to the hospital. He stuffed tissues into his nose and told his parents he had been skydiving. He even wrote 140, his crash speed, inside his helmet so he could beat it next time. That moment defined him. Danger didn't frighten him. It fascinated him. He said later, "If danger saves you time, you just decide what a second is worth." By 1970, Lauda had joined a Formula 3 team and soon earned the nickname The Computer for his calm, analytical style. He studied car data at night and argued with engineers about performance. Bernie Ecclestone once joked that Lauda would crash into his own mother if it meant saving a second. In 1971, despite limited success, he bought his way into Formula One by taking out another loan to race with March Engineering. His debut at the Austrian Grand Prix ended in mechanical failure, but he had broken into F1, a feat money couldn't usually buy. The next few years were tough. Lauda's precision and relentless drive often clashed with team management, but his intelligence impressed Ferrari. After several seasons of struggle and another risky loan to join BRM, he caught the attention of Enzo Ferrari himself. In 1974, Lauda joined Ferrari and immediately helped redesign their struggling car. By April, he had won his first Formula One race at the Spanish Grand Prix. He added another victory that season and became known for his disciplined approach. Ferrari was back at the front of the grid, and Lauda was leading the charge. In 1975, he truly arrived. He dominated the season, winning at Monaco, Sweden, and finally Monza, where he clinched his first world championship in front of Ferrari's home crowd. The 312T car he helped develop became a legend, and Ferrari ended an 11-year drought in the Drivers' Championship. Lauda was just 26 and already a world champion. But success didn't make him reckless, it made him more aware of the risks. Formula One in the 1970s was brutal. Cars were fast, fragile, and fires were common. Lauda constantly spoke out about safety, calling some races suicidal. When Ferrari's new engine kept failing during tests in 1976, he publicly criticized it, calling it unreliable junk. Enzo Ferrari was furious, but Lauda's honesty saved his job, and perhaps his life. Off the track, his life was full of both love and heartbreak. He married Marlene Naus, a Chilean-Austrian model, just 8 days after meeting her in 1976. But that same year, while on holiday, Marlene suffered a miscarriage at 16 weeks. Lauda never told anyone at Ferrari. He buried his grief in work, staying at the track late into the night, chasing perfection. Then came the Nürburgring Grand Prix. Lauda had warned everyone not to race there. The track stretched over 14 miles, with only 8 fire marshals, limited medical access, and no helicopters for the first 6 miles. But no one listened. On the second lap, his Ferrari veered off at Bergwerk Corner, hit an embankment and burst into flames. The impact tore his helmet loose and fire engulfed him. For fellow drivers, Arturo Merzario, Brett Lunger, Guy Edwards and Harold Ertl stopped their cars and ran toward the inferno. Merzario burned his hands trying to unbuckle Lauda's seatbelt. When they finally pulled him free, his suit had melted to his body. His face and lungs were severely burned, yet he was still conscious, whispering, "Tell Marlene I love her." At the hospital, doctors gave him last rites. His lungs were filled with toxic smoke, and his burns were agonizing. But Lauda refused to die. He demanded to stay awake during treatments, rejecting painkillers so his mind would remain sharp. Nurses described the horror of changing his bandages as like peeling wet paper from raw flesh. Still, he endured it, determined to return to racing. Amazingly, just 42 days later, Lauda returned to compete in the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. His face was still bandaged, his hands barely functional, and blood soaked through his balaclava, but he finished 4th. He admitted later that he was terrified the whole time, but his courage shocked the world. Meanwhile, his rival James Hunt was living a life of excess, partying, drinking, and chasing fame. The two were opposites. Hunt, the wild British playboy, and Lauda, the cold, methodical Austrian. Yet despite their rivalry, there was a mutual respect. The 1976 season became legendary. After missing 2 races due to the crash, Lauda returned and continued to fight for the title. It all came down to the final race in Japan. Torrential rain poured over Fuji Speedway. Lauda, whose tear ducts had been burned away, could barely see. After 2 laps, he pulled into the pits and withdrew, saying the conditions were too dangerous. Hunt went on to finish 3rd, winning the championship by a single point, 69-68. Many called Lauda a coward, but he said simply, "My life is worth more than a title." The trauma of 1976 haunted him for years. He suffered nightmares, flashbacks, and panic attacks. He became obsessed with fire safety and couldn't sleep. His marriage deteriorated, and Marlene eventually left with their children. Yet Lauda never stopped fighting. In 1977, he won his 2nd world championship, but soon left Ferrari after falling out with Enzo. He joined Brabham but eventually quit racing in 1979, saying he was tired of driving in circles.